There is no constitutional and no statutory authority for federal district judges to issue these injunctions. And so talk for a minute about the effect of that lack of authority.
I'm happy to, Senator. So I think that is correct. There is no statutory basis for granting universal injunctions, and there is no constitutional basis for doing so either.
I've got to tell you, being in Tennessee over the weekend and then doing a telephone town hall with several thousand Tennesseans last night, the overreach of the judiciary is something that continued to come up. The way we have seen these activist judges troubles people, and they're wanting to see something done, so they were pleased that we were having this hearing, and they're concerned that you are seeing district judges come in and exercise this sweeping injunctive relief that doesn't apply to the case before them, doesn't apply to the district in which they are seated. So, Professor Bray, I want to talk with you for just a moment. One of the things that Senator Grassley noted and that many of us have discussed is that there is no constitutional and no statutory authority for federal district judges to issue these injunctions. And so talk for a minute about the effect of that lack of authority.
I'm happy to, Senator. So I think that is correct. There is no statutory basis for granting universal injunctions, and there is no constitutional basis for doing so either. So courts, to be courts, have to exercise the judicial power. And the judicial power is not defined by the Constitution, but the Constitution instead uses what's a known commodity, that is the reference to the judicial power. It is courts deciding cases for the parties. So a universal injunction is fundamentally different from that. A class action is still a case. It's a case, it's a large case, but it's still a case, and if the class wins, the class wins. If the class loses, the class loses, but it's a decision for a case. And what makes the universal injunction different is you have a very small case and a remedy that's for everyone. So my friend Professor Vladeck noted this question about, like, what's going to be the interim rule? Is the interim rule going to be you have a policy or you don't have a policy? And when we have courts disagreeing about what the interim rule should be, we shouldn't default to, as long as there's one court that doesn't like it, it's stopped. That's what makes it a sclerotic effect on government action. The government can't act if all it takes is one court not wanting the rule or the policy to go into effect for the entire country.
Let me ask you also about injunction bonds, because under Rule 65, then a party who is seeking an injunction is required. The bond is mandatory, but we have not seen that used in these nationwide injunctions against President Trump. So speak a little bit about the utilization of injunction bonds and when that's appropriate.
I'm happy to, Senator. I have an above-median interest in injunction bonds, and I'm happy to talk about them. So there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple days ago that suggested it was a problem for injunctions that were being given against the Trump administration, that no injunction bonds were required. Now, I do think the federal rules of civil procedure require injunction bonds. I think it would be a good practice for federal courts to be requiring injunction bonds. Follow the rule. Require injunction bonds whenever you give an injunction against the federal government. And I think it's a way of taking into account the regulatory interests of the federal government and the costs injunctions impose. That being said, there's nothing invalid about an injunction just because it's not accompanied by an injunction bond. It still has to be followed. That doesn't mean the court lacks jurisdiction. It's still an order of a court, and it must be followed for that reason.
Thank you. Professor Vladek, I wanted to talk to you about something you said in your testimony, and I thought it was really very interesting. You said that, and I'm quoting, "We have a Justice Department engaged in highly partisan and ethically dubious behavior," end quote. And I could not disagree with you more in that statement, and I really find it just rich with irony after we've sat here for 4 years and watched President Biden's DOJ weaponized against the American people. We had parents that went to school boards that were called domestic terrorists, and we have seen 2 tiers of justice. So you can submit for me in writing, since my time has expired, your explanation of why the Biden DOJ was not highly partisan, and you have assumed that the Trump DOJ is.